friend of mine told me, try America Online. I said, why? I've got a computer. He said, try it. You'll see. It's simple. Every time you sign on,
welcome,
it tells you if you've got mail.
you've got mail.
Want to send some email? Type the message, click here, and it's done. I like this. With one click, I can browse all kinds of great features on America Online. I've gotten help with my golf swing, I've planned my next vacation, even get stock price updates every 15 minutes. America Online has over 100 newspapers and magazines, everything from Business Week Online to Cycle World, and I can browse them all. With America Online, you can point and click your way across the internet. And their web browser makes it easy to explore the World Wide Web. Call the toll-free number and you'll receive your free startup kit and 10 free hours to look around. It's worth a try. You'll see.
To try America Online free, call 1-800-313-1919. You'll receive your free America Online startup kit and 10 free hours your first month. Call now.
AOL, or America Online, but most would just call it AOL, is an American company specializing in the internet. And if you haven't heard of them, then you're probably not old enough, young lady, or man, whoever you are. Because once, particularly in the 1990s, AOL was one of the dominant internet providers in the United States. They were all over the place, and the vast majority of people had them. But into the 2000s, they fell off, and fell off hard. And nowadays, while they are still around, they are a shell of what they once were. What happened to them? Why aren't they still in their position? Let's find out. AOL's history dates back to way earlier than you'd think. They started in 1983. Yes, they're that old, but they weren't called AOL back then. The original company was known as Control Video Corporation, or CVC, and it was founded by William von Meister. At that time, they only sold a single product, which was known as GameLine. It was a dial-up game distribution device for the Atari 2600. Yes. Really? I'm sure that even if you know what an Atari 2600 is, you probably haven't heard of GameLine, because it was a relatively niche thing, as you can imagine. Online for the 2600? I mean, it's cool, but how did this even work? Well, as I said, it distributed games. It didn't allow for online multiplayer or anything like that. What it allowed for was that subscribers could buy a modem from the company for about $50 and pay a one-time $15 setup fee. The device allowed them to temporarily download games and keep track of their high scores at a cost of a single dollar per game. And it didn't have to stay connected to the phone line all the time. The game would stay inside the GameLine's module, and it would remain playable until the user turned the console off or downloaded a different game. It was interesting, but weird, and definitely ahead of the time. Though it wasn't their first idea for a product either. Initially, von Meister wanted to create a device that would allow for the buying of music on demand in much the same way. And Warner Brothers rejected that idea because who would want to download music through the internet or, the phone line? What? No, that would never be a thing. Don't be ridiculous. Silly. Now, with only a single product under their roster, you can imagine that CVC didn't really last very long, and no, they didn't. GameLine wasn't very successful. It didn't help that the video game industry went through a crash, right then, during that same year, so it was really bad timing for something weird, too. But a man by the name of Steve Case was hired on as a marketing consultant for Control Video, and in May, another man named Jim Kimsey was also hired as a manufacturing consultant. By May of 1983, Control Video was already near bankruptcy, and there didn't seem to be anything they could do about it. Kimsey did bring in a friend from West Point, Frank Caulfield, to invest, but by early 1985, von Meister would leave the company. On May 24th, 1985, the company would effectively change its name, basically. It's probably more accurate to say they kind of rebooted themselves as Quantum Computer Services, QCS. Because Quantum sounds fancy, and it's 1985. Quantum's cool. Yeah. Kimsey served as the Chief Executive Officer, and Mark Seraph as the Chief Technology Officer. Kimsey was looking to change their strategy into something that, well, frankly actually made them money, they launched a dedicated online service for the Commodore 64 and 128 computers, which they called Quantum Link, or Q-Link, and they started making online link services for other types of computers. In May of 1988, Quantum and Apple launched Apple Link Personal Edition for the Apple II and Macintosh, and in August that same year, Quantum would launch PC Link, which was a service for IBM-compatible PCs that they developed jointly with the Tandy Corporation. They parted ways with Apple in October of 1989, but the service still existed, so they changed the name to America Online. See where this is going? You see where this is going? Yeah, I bet you do. Steve Case was still with the company, and he promoted and sold AOL as the online service for people who were unfamiliar with computers. So in those days, that was basically everyone. Computers and PCs especially were still brand new. A lot of people didn't even own one, let alone know what an internet was. And it was a good decision because it contrasted with CompuServe, another online service, but they were well established in the technical community. People who knew about computers liked CompuServe. AOL decided to specialize in what is a computer. In February of 1991, AOL for DOS was launched using a GeoWorks interface, and in 1992 they launched AOL for Windows. These launches coincided with a market shift towards pay-based online services. People were actually interested in getting online, and they were willing to pay a subscription fee, as, well, you pretty much still do now with your internet bill. It was especially popular in the gaming scene, as there were some games that were starting to take advantage of the internet back in those days. For example, Neverwinter Nights from Stormfront Studios. The original Neverwinter Nights was among the earliest multiplayer online role-playing games. Not MMO, it wasn't massively multiplayer, but multiplayer. You could play with friends over the internet. You could play a game with your friends on the internet, guys! It's so revolutionary! Also, back then, you might not have gotten sworn at by a 12-year-old who wants his new skin in Fortnite! Anyway, but the subscriptions back then didn't work the same as they do now. In those days, the average subscription lasted roughly 25 months, and accounted for $350 in total revenue. People who owned modems were invited to try America Online free. And yes, in 1991, just to be clear, they should have changed their company name to America Online too. They discontinued both Q-Link and PC-Link in late 1994, focusing exclusively on the America Online aspect. And one of the reasons AOL got so big was due to their, well, as they put it, carpet bombing marketing campaign. What does that mean? Well, CMO Jan Brandt decided to distribute as many of the free trial AOL discs as possible. And she really meant it. There was a point in time when 50% of the CDs in production worldwide had an AOL logo on them. It was ludicrous, and I guarantee a lot of you who grew up in the 90s at least saw one of these at some point, if not even used them. But the point is, it worked. They surpassed literally all of their competitors. Genie, Prodigy, CompuServe, every single one of them was left in the dust as America Online rocketed to the top. They were doing some other things. They even had their own web browser, purchasing BookLink for this purpose, though that didn't last very long. In 1996, they replaced it with a browser that was based solely on Internet Explorer. This was in exchange for inclusion of AOL in Windows, so it was kind of a mutually beneficial thing with Microsoft. They began launching a whole bunch of services with so many education providers. Literally, like all of them, basically. National Geographic, Smithsonian, Discovery Networks, everything. Just everything was powered by AOL at the time. They powered the first online exhibit for the Library of Congress in 1991, and even offered the first parental controls, which, as a dad, that's actually really cool. No, seriously, that's nice. The internet's dangerous for kids. Seriously, I know some of you youngins are probably like, I don't like those parental controls. We're just trying to keep you away from creeps, okay? In the early days, America Online's rates were actually charged hourly, if you could believe that, which I know in the modern internet that sounds insane because we're literally always connected, but back then, with dial-up, it was different. And even phones back then kind of worked on the hourly rate scheme. Really, nobody does that anymore because it's horrid, but that's how it worked. At least until December of 1996, when they decided to shift that over to a much more customer-friendly flat monthly rate of $19.95. That was actually a pretty good deal, honestly. This was one of their first missteps, not because it was a bad idea, but because they did not predict how much people were gonna love this. Their systems weren't ready for it, and their connections were constantly flooded with users trying to get online, and this generally resulted in a whole bunch of busy signals. No one could get on because the lines were clogged, and a lot of people were so angry they would cancel their accounts as a result. They even made a special commercial just to explain themselves about this, with Steve Case himself apologizing and explaining that they were working day and night to fix this major issue. In a way, it actually kind of worked because it was remarkably honest of them to do this. They could have made excuses, but they really didn't. And it was an understandable error on their part, and they did genuinely fix it. They kept the monthly rate alive, and within 3 years, their base grew to 10 million people, all dialing up in glorious 1990s internet. Beautiful. Towards the late 90s, they would be the dominant online service even internationally, with more than 34 million total subscribers. And as I mentioned when I talked about Netscape, they bought them. They actually bought quite a few assets during this time, because why not? They acquired CompuServe, for example, via WorldCom, and in 1996 they bought eWorld, which was an online service that was operated by Apple. It included things like email, news, software installs, and a bulletin board system. In December of '99, they even got a hold of MapQuest for $1.1 billion. You guys remember MapQuest? You know? I mean, it's still around, it still works, but like, there's a bunch of other options, and you also have a GPS in your pocket now. It's a little old school, but we all used MapQuest back in my day. Before smartphones, we had MapQuest. You go in a new place. It was great. Anyway, it was about the year 2000 that things started to change for AOL quite a bit. And for one thing, they weren't actually AOL anymore. Or, well, they wouldn't be shortly. See, they had decided they were going to merge with Time Warner Entertainment, and that would form AOL Time Warner Incorporated. Now, both were very large companies at the time, and the logic here was that Time Warner was able to combine all their entertainment assets and their media stuff and all that with AOL's network, and would allow them to become a media juggernaut. The terms of the deal called for AOL's shareholders to own 55% of the new company. So they would technically be in operational control, but only just barely, and the deal closed on January 11th, 2001. This new company was led by executives from AOL, SBI, and Time Warner. They dropped AOL entirely from the name the next year, but they were still doing the service. It wasn't that the company was gone, they were just under a different name, but the service was still called AOL, so everyone still kind of called it AOL, it was whatever. But this was huge, and I mean that quite literally. It was the largest corporate merger in history when it was completed, with a combined value of the companies at $360 billion. And with this tremendous value, a dominant position in the online marketplace, and cool tools that people were using, like AOL Instant Messenger. Anyone remember that? Anyone else remember AIM? No? Just me? Listen, before social media and just free texting all around and Discord and all this, we had AOL Instant Messenger. We called it AIM, and it was really friggin' neat, guys. Okay? Anyway, with all that, they should be fine, and they were not. They were really, really, really not. Everything kind of started falling apart pretty much immediately. The $360 billion value fell very sharply to as low as just $120 billion, less than half, partially due to the markets repricing AOL's valuation. They did go back up in value, but this was also about the time the dot-com bubble burst, meaning that anyone working within the internet sphere was starting to suffer. But AOL could weather that storm. That wasn't a big deal to them. What was a big deal was this little thing we like to call broadband. Do you know what broadband is? Do you? Well, basically it's the equivalent of the internet you're using right now. You know, the internet where you just start up your computer and it's already online. The internet where you can just click on the browser and you're there. There's no dial-up. Yeah, that was broadband. And it started rolling out about the year 2000 and swiftly became a lot more popular with people. Mostly because it was frankly better in basically every conceivable way. It was both more convenient and much faster, and AOL's online service continued to focus on dial-up. This was a problem, because people didn't want dial-up anymore. It's true, a lot of people still did. It was cheaper, they could do that, but if you could afford it, you were gonna go with broadband, especially since as the 2000s wore on, broadband was getting cheaper and more attractive to new subscribers. People left AOL to go to anywhere that offered broadband, and AOL refused to adapt, partially because AOL and Time Warner didn't actually work very well together. Well, on paper, the merger proudly made a lot of sense. They had completely different corporate cultures, and they didn't synergize what they wanted to do. And even though literally all of their competitors were starting to shift over to broadband, embracing this new technology, AOL stuck with dial-up. Nobody wanted dial-up anymore. Why would you do that? But don't worry guys. They have a really good idea, a really solid decision, a wonderful fix for all of this. They're gonna rebrand. Yes, that's the problem. That's exactly the issue. Of course. It has nothing to do with the product. It has to do with the brand. Duh. On April 3rd, 2006, AOL announced that they would retire the full name America Online and just call themselves AOL, which is hilarious. Because everyone had been calling them AOL the whole time anyway. What kind of rebranding is that? They did make some shifts in terms of their business practices. For example, they announced they would offer email accounts and software that was previously available only to paying customers. But this was provided that users accessed AOL through an access method not owned by AOL. This was an attempt to not only build back their reputation among the general public, but also reduce costs, because since they weren't giving access, it didn't really cost them anything to allow this. Plus, a lot of other companies like Microsoft, Hotmail, and Yahoo were offering free email, which you didn't have to pay for. And a lot of people were leaving AOL because why would they pay for an email when they could have it for literally nothing? Also, I brought up their reputation. Yeah, see, during this time, in the late 90s, 2000s, when people were starting to not want to subscribe to them, AOL was accused of doing some pretty shady stuff, mostly down to the account cancellation thing, as well as billing disputes. See, as people started wanting to cancel their accounts, AOL decided that it was a really great decision. Just a wonderful, top tier, this is definitely going to make all people happy and want to be our customers decision. In that they would make the process of canceling the account as outrageously difficult as possible, to the point of being straight up impossible. And they were accused of being slow to stop billing customers after the accounts were effectively canceled, if they even got that far. An investigation showed that the company had an elaborate scheme in place that rewarded employees who managed to convince customers to not cancel their subscriptions. And that sounds like a good thing, because you're rewarding an employee who, keeps a customer. That's good. But the problem with this particular setup is that it incentivized employees to be as dirty with this practice as possible. Most of the time, that subscription was retained against the customer's wishes, or straight up without their consent. They simply wouldn't cancel the subscription. While customer service personnel received bonuses that were worth tens of thousands of dollars, customers were finding that they were still being charged for an account they were pretty sure they had canceled and had to call again, and were given the runaround again and again and again. This went on for years. They also faced some backlash against those discs. Remember I said they manufactured just a whole heap, just so many discs for promotional materials? Well, they were accused of that being, wasteful. Which, yeah, it was, though there wasn't anything illegal about it. Though they were kind of accused of harassment with how often they bothered people about subscribing to them. Their marketing tactics were aggressive to the point of being annoying. And of course, absolutely none of this helped them retain any subscribers. They continued falling off, and they were sitting there scratching their heads like, what are we doing wrong? Well, it might be because you still aren't investing in newer technology that people actually want to use. If you used broadband, it would be a different story. People are jumping ship both because they're irritated with you and because you're offering an inferior product. You're doing both things wrong. Because it'd be one thing if they offered an inferior product but actually had really good customer service. That might help retain some customers. Well, I don't like the dial-up, but AOL's been really good to me. But AOL's not doing either of these things. They're not offering fast internet or convenient internet, and they're not being nice at all. So why would anyone want to give you their money? For any reason. By 2007, they had been reduced to 10.1 million subscribers, only slightly more than the number of subscribers of Comcast and AT&T Yahoo. And even some of their other services like AOL Instant Messenger or AIM started floundering under new competition, as well as the rise of social media. Into the 2000s, people just weren't using standalone instant messengers anymore. They started using social media sites, starting with MySpace, but into Twitter, Facebook, things like that. But don't worry, AOL's here because they definitely want to get in the social media business, and they're gonna buy one of them. Yes, they are, absolutely. And they're gonna buy Bebo for $850 million. What was Bebo? Some of you probably don't even know what that is. Well, for a brief period, it was actually pretty popular. It was an America's social networking site that was started in 2005. For a time, it actually overtook MySpace to become the most widely used social networking site in the United Kingdom. Not worldwide, it didn't do that. But that was still impressive. They would register 10.7 million unique users, so they were doing pretty well. And then AOL bought them. And they proceeded to fall right into the ground after this, just hard. They paid nearly $1 billion for this thing, and it proceeded to fall off almost immediately, destroyed by Facebook. And it was one thing for AOL to buy a pre-existing social network. It was quite another to manage it. They had no idea what to do with one, or how to make one fun and user-friendly. The problem with Bebo is that it needed to be updated to compete with Facebook, and they had no idea how to do that. They would eventually sell it off in 2010 for way less than they had paid for it. Just the year before, in 2009, Time Warner opted to cut AOL out of their lives. They were over it. It just wasn't working anymore. They were doing nothing right. So they spun off AOL, and they unveiled a brand new brand identity with the words A lowercase o-L. Oh, that's cute. That's still not helping. I seriously wonder sometimes how much money they spent on like think tanks and test clients and things like that to figure out what brand to shift to. I understand branding is important, but it is impossible for me to overstate how not the problem the branding was for AOL. That was never the issue. At all. The issue was the product. Because the thing about the tech industry especially is you have to innovate constantly. Technology is one of the fastest evolving markets there is. Probably the fastest evolving market. And unless you are constantly staying on top of things, you are going to get rolled very quickly by the next up-and-comer. Which is exactly what AOL wound up with, but the thing was, they had enough money where they could have reoriented themselves pretty easily. And they proceeded to continually not do that. Why? Why are you like this? Well, instead of doing that, realizing they likely were not able to innovate themselves, they continued buying other things, like Patch Media, which was a network of community-specific news and information sites. They also acquired TechCrunch. I'd continued going over the long list of acquisitions, but needless to say, they spent a lot of money on that. Some were good, some were bad, it varied. But they still weren't really innovating, they were just kind of buying other innovators, you know? They even got a hold of HuffPost for $315 million. And they moved into the online video advertising And that was probably a good decision, since during that time it was the rise of sites like YouTube. I don't know if you guys know this, but I make pretty much all my money on ads. That's how we do it here. And they launched the AOL ON network, which is a single website for their video output. In February of 2013, they did report a growth in quarterly revenue, which was the first time that it happened in 8 years, so they must have been doing something right. But by August, things took a turn for the worse again. They were starting to scale back Patch Media, or even sell hundreds of the local news sites underneath that roster. And then layoffs began. In 2014, Patch Media was spun off entirely. And by the end of 2014, AOL controlled just 0.74% of the global advertising market. This was a pittance compared to the industry's leader, Google, who had 31.4%. AOL didn't give up though. Earlier that same year, they acquired Gravity. It was a new software startup. A very exciting one. You know what they did? You're gonna love this. They tracked users' online behavior and tailored ads, as well as content, based on their interests. Yup, they bought a company that was doing that. It didn't really help them, though. Despite that being what, let's be honest, every single social media outlet does to us now, it didn't matter. On May 12th, 2015, AOL was actually bought out for $50 per share by Verizon. And early on, this particular buyout was actually received fairly positively by both AOL as well as industry specialists. A lot of people felt it made sense for Verizon because it would broaden their advertising sales platforms and increase their video production ability through websites like HuffPost, as well as Engadget. At the time of the buyout, AOL still had about 2 million dial-up subscribers, and Verizon wasn't done gobbling up internet companies. See, just the following year, they announced their plans to purchase the core internet business of Yahoo! You guys remember that? No? No, just me? Alright, whatever. The deal went through. Verizon got a hold of Yahoo and decided to just merge AOL and Yahoo together. Originally called Oath Incorporated, though in 2019 it was rebranded as Verizon Media. On May 3rd, 2021, Verizon announced it would sell 90% of its Verizon Media division to Apollo Global Management for $5 billion. And as a result, they were renamed again to just Yahoo! I'm sorry, I had to. Yahoo Incorporated. That's where AOL is. Right now. They're under Yahoo through all this shifting and sales and stuff and all that. That's where the remnants of the once mighty America Online remain, with the second iteration of friggin' Yahoo! But as a result, AOL does technically still exist. Some think they went under. That's not true. They never actually went under, nor did they even enter a bankruptcy. They just went downhill. They're not even close to the powerhouse they once were. And it's all because, simply put, they did both things wrong. They A, annoyed the living heck out of literally all of their customers. All of them. Forever, eternally. To the point that nobody could stand them or even want to do business with them. And 2, they didn't innovate. They didn't even try to innovate. And when they attempted to innovate, they decided to spend just so much money on things that other people had built, assuming that it would help them. But in reality, it very rarely did, and they kind of stopped working on anything for themselves. Mind you, this company started as an innovator. It tried to take advantage of online at a time when basically no one else was doing that. I mean, heck, the first product from the original company was an online service for Atari. If that's not forward thinking, I don't know what is. But at some point, I'd say right about here, they completely forgot about innovation. They stopped caring about it, believing that they couldn't be stopped. They were too high on their pedestal and got knocked down real hard, to the point that even now, they're somewhat of a joke. I don't think most people from the 90s even have fond memories of AOL. When you mention it to people who remember them, most reply with some embittered annoyance, which sounds about accurate. I did like AIM, though. Seriously, the Instant Messenger was really cool. People liked that. Had fun with that. But basically nothing else, like, honestly. And with that, a special thank you Built to all my underwater train finders, some dude 267, Benjamin Owens, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, Jack Carson's Railroad Videos, Lord Off 444, Isurfer 1405, Charles Kwiatkowski, Matt Weaver, Tom Redlion, NS Productions 8104, Wheeljack 8401, Rescues Greyhounds, The Baxter, Caleb Crosswhite, Josh Johnson, Caleb Rainwaters, Perez Drenton, Master of None, Travis Dolinsky, JBL Explorers, Tommy Rossini, Ben McCullough, Panzer Kitsune 131, Jess 232, Mark Holding, Mr. Terevel, Hayden DeGrow, Bad Train Puns Are Best, Kurt Forkham, Mr. Sleepy, Harry, Drew Dupree, George Kenny, Kevin Wood, Liam Wright, Hendrick Motorsports Fan 5, Hannah Bird, Duraushi, A Person 723, William Nemo, Dr. Racer 78, Shimasu, Metal for Life Guy, Andrew Bowen, Crimson Rose, Ryan Wehofer, Jared Brussel, Zintac M, Boss K, Orange Glass, Andy, The Conceptualist, Acoletti, Ohio Trucker 1, Wendy City Rails, John Videolaw, AET Museum, NJ 1969, Extra Special J, Jonathan Coco, Kieran Tibbetts, and of course, my dad. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fun farewell.